We think of early Americans as brave settlers. They faced harsh lands and built new lives. But history shows they were more than just brave. They were nearly invincible. No roads, no easy supplies, just endless, wild country. Yet, they didn't just survive against all odds, they thrived. They held a set of skills that made them an unstoppable force. What they knew will absolutely blow your mind. Get ready to see the real power they carried. When these families first arrived, they had almost nothing, just the supplies they could carry on their backs. Their first homes were simple log cabins they had to build from scratch, often miles from the nearest neighbor. If you got sick or hurt, there was no doctor coming to help. You were completely on your own. Sickness was a constant threat, and the reality was brutal. Many women died during childbirth, and many children never made it past infancy. Just waking up the next day was a victory. But here's the thing, they didn't survive by luck. They had a deep understanding of the land and a set of skills we've almost completely forgotten. These weren't just tips and tricks. They were the foundational knowledge that built a nation. So today, we're breaking down the 13 essential skills that made them unstoppable. Let's get started. Number 1. Finding water in remote areas. Nothing else mattered if you couldn't find water. Out here, you were done for in a matter of days. Settlers learned to read the land like a map. Seeing a patch of willow or cottonwood trees was a dead giveaway, since those plants only grow where water is close. They also watched the animals. If you saw a bunch of different tracks all heading in one direction, it was like a highway leading straight to a stream or spring. This skill was absolutely critical. But once they had water, they faced an even bigger challenge. Number 2. Navigating without maps. So you found water, but you're in an ocean of trees with no map and no compass. Getting lost out here simply wasn't an option. For these early settlers, the land was the map. They didn't learn navigation from a book. They lived it every single day while hunting or moving livestock. They knew every creek, valley, and ridge by heart. This wasn't about a few clever tricks, it was a deep, instinctual knowledge of their environment. But knowing where you were was only half the battle. Number 3. Building emergency shelter. The other half of that battle was against the elements themselves. Exposure could take you out faster than anything else. When families arrived with only what they could carry, building a shelter wasn't just a priority, it was the first thing they did. They immediately got to work building simple, rough cabins from the logs around them. These weren't fancy homes, they were just 4 walls and a roof to keep the cold out. It was a life or death race against the clock. But even the best shelter won't keep you alive forever. Number 4. Tracking wildlife. A shelter keeps you from freezing, but it can't fill your stomach. For these families, hunting wasn't a sport, it was survival. They showed up with barely any supplies, so finding food was an immediate, desperate need. This skill was so critical that boys learned to hunt almost as soon as they could walk. They learned to read the forest like a book, spotting every broken twig or fresh track that could lead them to a meal. It was a vital part of everyday life. But getting the food was only half the battle. Number 5. Starting fires in any weather. You can't eat what you can't cook. For these families, a fire was life itself. It meant a hot meal, warmth against the freezing cold, and a way to keep predators at bay in the pitch-black night. With no matches, they used flint and steel. The trick was getting a spark to catch on dry tinder, a nearly impossible task in the rain or snow. Mastering this meant knowing exactly where to find dry materials, even when everything around them was soaked through. But survival was about more than just the basics. Number 6. Identifying edible plants. When a hunt failed, knowing which plants were safe to eat could mean the difference between starving and surviving. But this knowledge went way beyond just finding a meal. Women especially knew which roots and herbs could be used as medicine, or even to make dyes for clothing. The real trick was telling the life-saving plants from the deadly ones. Almost every edible plant has a poisonous look-alike, and one mistake could be your last. It was a science passed down through generations. But gathering food was just the first step. Number 7. Crossing rivers safely. Sometimes the most dangerous part of the journey was the landscape itself. A calm-looking river could hide a deadly current, and drowning was one of the leading causes of death for pioneers. They learned to find the widest, shallowest point to cross, even if it meant going miles out of their way. Before risking a wagon, a rider on the strongest horse would test the water, or they'd use long poles to check the riverbed's depth and firmness. But crossing the water was one thing. Treating an injury was another. Number 8. Repairing equipment in the field. And it wasn't just your body that could break down in the wilderness. When a tool or a piece of your wagon broke, there was no hardware store. Frontier families often had only the supplies they carried with them. This forced them to become masters of improvisation. The same skills they used to carve a new tool out of wood or tan and animal hide into leather were the same skills they used to fix what they had. Their entire survival depended on their ingenuity to maintain their essential gear. But sometimes the biggest threat wasn't a broken tool. Number 9. Hunting for sustenance. For these early settlers, hunting wasn't a sport. It was how you put food on the table, period. A missed shot didn't just mean you went home empty-handed, it could mean your family went hungry. That's why so many relied on the incredibly accurate long rifle. When every single bullet counted, you couldn't afford to miss, and once an animal was down, they used a large knife to butcher it on the spot, making sure absolutely nothing went to waste. This wasn't a hobby, it was a core life skill. But wild animals weren't the only danger lurking in the woods. Number 10. Reading weather patterns. A sudden storm wasn't just an inconvenience. It could wipe out your crops, flood a river crossing, or leave you freezing miles from home. With no weather app to check, settlers learned to read the signs nature gave them. A red sky at night often meant good weather was coming, but a red sunrise was a storm warning. They also watched animal behavior. When birds flew low to the ground, it was a good bet that rain was on its way. This wasn't superstition, it was a life or death calculation. But reading the sky couldn't prevent every accident or illness. Number 11. Preserving food on long journeys. When you were on the move for weeks, a successful hunt was great, but all that fresh meat would spoil fast. You couldn't just carry it with you. So they learned to preserve it. A common way was by smoking or drying. They'd cut the meat into thin strips and hang it over a smoky, low-heat fire, or even just let it air dry. This created a lightweight, protein-packed food that could last for months. Basically the original jerky. It was essential for any long-distance travel. But keeping your energy up was one thing. Staying healthy was another. Number 12. Making useful tools from natural materials. When settlers arrived, they couldn't just go buy what they needed. The forest was their hardware store. They carved everything from the landscape, from farm plows to the spoons they ate with. Even cooking meat meant finding the right green branch to use as a spit. They also knew how to turn animal hides into tough leather for moccasins and harnesses. It was a world where you had to make your own tools just to survive. And sometimes the most important tools weren't for building, they were for healing. Number 13. Traveling long distances with minimal supplies. Out in the remote backcountry, frontiersmen were completely on their own, often for weeks at a time. There were no supply lines to fall back on, so they carried only what was absolutely essential. Their entire kit basically boiled down to just 2 critical tools: a long rifle to hunt for food, and a large knife for butchering game, and everything else. They didn't pack for the journey, they simply lived off the land as they went. But even the most skilled traveler could be stopped cold by one simple thing: an injury.